In 43 years on this bench, I have been lied to, manipulated, screamed at, and cried at. I have had people beg me, flatter me, and try to bribe me. I have watched powerful men crumble and broken people rise. But I have never, not once in 4 decades, had a woman stand in my courtroom, look me dead in the eyes, and say the words that Diana Castillo said to me on the morning of October 3rd, 2024, at exactly 10:22 a.m. What she said to me lasted less than 15 seconds. What happened to her because of it will last the rest of her life. You think you know what privilege looks like? You think you know what it means when someone believes the rules simply don't apply to them? Stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a courtroom story. It's a story about a single mother who almost lost everything, and a woman so drunk on her husband's power that she forgot one fundamental truth. In my courtroom, there is no rank. There is no title. There is no last name powerful enough to shield you from what you've done. Hit that subscribe button right now, because this story went further than any case I have ever presided over. And by the end, you will understand exactly why. Let me take you back to where this all began. It was a Wednesday morning in early September 2024 when my clerk, Margaret, handed me a case file that seemed on its surface completely routine. Case number 2024 MV 11342. A noise ordinance violation and a harassment complaint. The defendant, Diana Castillo, age 47, resident of Fairview Heights, the most expensive zip code in our county. The complainant, Rosa Delgado, age 38, a home health aide and single mother of 3 children, ages 5, 9, and 14. I read Rosa's name and then I read the incident report, and I felt something shift in my chest. Rosa Delgado had been working the night shift caring for an elderly woman, Mrs. Eleanor Hartman, 84 years old, a retired school teacher who had been diagnosed with late-stage Parkinson's disease. Rosa had been Mrs. Hartman's primary caregiver for 3 years. She worked from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 6 nights a week, making $19.40 an hour. She lived with her 3 children in a small duplex on Coventry Street, a quiet working-class block on the east side of the city. Her oldest daughter, Isabella, age 14, stayed home to watch the younger 2 children while Rosa worked nights. Let me tell you something about Rosa Delgado before I go any further, because you need to understand who this woman is. Rosa came to this country from Guatemala at age 22 with a nursing certification, $50 and a suitcase. She didn't speak a word of English. She learned it while working double shifts in a hospital laundry room. She put herself through a certified nursing assistant program while pregnant with her first child. She had never, not once, received a single government assistance payment. Fellow workers at the home care agency described her as the kind of person who would sit with a dying patient and hold their hand through the night even when her shift had ended, just so they wouldn't be alone. On the night of August 29th, 2024, at approximately 11:15 p.m., Rosa was leaving Mrs. Hartman's residence after her shift ended. She was walking to her 2011 Honda Civic parked on the street in front of the house, when the front door of the house directly across the street flew open. A woman stormed down the front steps in a silk robe and designer slippers. She had a glass of red wine in her hand. She stopped at the edge of her driveway and she looked at Rosa, and then she said something Rosa will never forget. She told Rosa that she was sick of seeing her beat-up little car parked on her street every night. She said that people like Rosa shouldn't be driving through this neighborhood at all, let alone parking here. She used words I will not repeat on this recording. Ugly words. Words designed to remind Rosa exactly what this woman thought of her. Rosa stood still. She told me later she was too shocked to move. She had been parking on that public street for 3 years. She had never spoken to this woman. She had never done anything to this woman. Rosa quietly said she had every right to park on a public street and that she meant no disrespect. Diana Castillo stepped closer. She pointed her finger in Rosa's face and said, and I am quoting directly from Rosa's signed statement, she said, "Do you have any idea who my husband is? One phone call and I will have your car towed, your license pulled, and you thrown out of this country before the sun comes up. Now get off my street." Rosa's hands were shaking, but she got in her car and she drove home. She sat in her driveway for 20 minutes before she went inside because she didn't want her children to see her cry. The next morning, she filed a harassment complaint with the city. 2 days later, she got a call from her supervisor at the home care agency. Someone had called the agency and reported Rosa for reckless parking and disruptive behavior near a patient's home. The complaint was anonymous, but the call had come from a cell phone registered to a woman named Diana Castillo. Rosa's supervisor, to his credit, reviewed the complaint, found no basis for it, and told Rosa to document everything and pursue it legally. And that is how Diana Castillo, wife of Captain Gerald Castillo, 23-year veteran of the Fairview Police Department, head of the department's Community Liaison Division, ended up standing in my courtroom on October 3rd, 2024. I had been on the bench for 11 minutes when her case was called. I saw her the moment she walked through the doors. Diana Castillo was dressed as though she had somewhere more important to be. Ivory blazer, tailored, slacks that probably cost more than Rosa's car payment. Her hair was done. Her makeup was done. She wore the expression of someone who had never once been genuinely inconvenienced in her adult life. Walking beside her was an attorney, Franklin Morse, a partner at Morse & Daly on the 4th floor of the Westfield Tower downtown. I knew his firm. I had seen them in my courtroom before. They charged $450 an hour, and they specialized in making uncomfortable things quietly disappear. Rosa Delgado sat in the gallery in her homemade scrubs. She had come straight from a night shift. There were circles under her eyes. Her hands were folded in her lap exactly the same way every exhausted, decent person sits when they walk into a room where they're not sure they'll be believed. I looked at both of these women and I knew what I was dealing with. I called the case number 2024 MV 11342, City versus Diana Castillo, noise ordinance violation, count 1, harassment, count 2. Attorney Morse immediately stood up and said, with the practiced smoothness of a man who had done this 1,000 times, that his client strongly denied all allegations, that the complainant had a history of parking disputes with neighbors, and that Mrs. Castillo was a respected member of the community whose husband served this city with distinction. I let him finish. Then I asked Rosa Delgado to take the stand. She stood up. She walked to the front. She sat down. She looked at me, and I saw it again. That same thing I see in the faces of people who have been made to feel small by someone who had no right to make them feel that way. I asked her to tell me, in her own words, exactly what happened on the night of August 29th. She told me everything, quietly, clearly, without exaggeration. Her voice only cracked once when she described sitting in her driveway, not wanting her children to see her face. The courtroom was absolutely silent. When she finished, I thanked her and I asked one question. I said, Rosa, in 3 years of parking on that street to care for Mrs. Hartman, had anyone else ever complained to you? She said, no, Your Honor, never. I said, did you ever meet Diana Castillo before that night? She said, no, Your Honor, never. I said, thank you. You may return to your seat. Then I turned to Diana Castillo. I said, Mrs. Castillo, you've heard the testimony. Would you like to address the court? Her attorney started to rise. She put her hand on his arm and stood up herself. And here is where everything changed. Diana Castillo looked at me with an expression I can only describe as impatience. Not remorse, not discomfort, not even the basic social grace of pretending to take this seriously. Impatience, like I was a mildly inconvenient errand she needed to get through before her lunch reservation. She said, and I want you to hear every single word of this, she said, Your Honor, I think we all know how this city works. My husband has given 23 years to this department. We have relationships at every level of this courthouse. I came here today as a courtesy. But if this process continues to waste my time, I will be making some phone calls this afternoon that will make things very uncomfortable for everyone in this room, including you. The courtroom went so quiet I could hear the ventilation system humming. I looked at Diana Castillo for a long moment. I have been threatened in many ways over 43 years. I have been threatened by gang members and corporate executives. I have been threatened by politicians and their lawyers. I have been screamed at, and I have had objects thrown in my courtroom. But I want you to understand something about what Diana Castillo just did. She didn't just threaten me. She threatened the entire institution I represent. She walked into a court of law and told a sitting judge that her husband's connections were more powerful than justice itself. She said it calmly, confidently, with a small smile, because she believed it. She had gotten away with it before. I could see it in the way she said it. The practiced ease of someone who had watched that exact sentence open doors and close complaints for years and years. I took a breath. I looked down at my bench. I looked back up at Diana Castillo, and I said 7 words. I said, "Bailiff, please secure the doors of this courtroom. Are you still watching? I need you to drop a comment right now and tell me, what would you have done in my position?" Because what I did next had never been done in my courthouse in over 30 years. And what happened in the following 4 weeks will absolutely shock you. When the bailiff secured the doors, Diana Castillo's attorney was on his feet instantly. He said, "Your Honor, I must object." I held up one hand and he stopped talking. I said, "Mr. Morse, your client has just made explicit threats against officers of this court in open session. I am invoking judicial authority under Section 42 of the State Court Code. This proceeding is now sealed until I determine the appropriate course of action. No one will be leaving this courtroom for the next several minutes." I looked at Diana Castillo. For the first time since she walked in, that impatient expression flickered. I said, "Mrs. Castillo, I want to make certain you understand what you have just done. You have in open court, in front of a gallery of witnesses, a court reporter, and an active recording system, threatened a sitting judge with retaliation for performing her judicial duties. That is not a dispute. That is not a misunderstanding. Under state law, that constitutes criminal contempt of court, obstruction of justice, and attempted judicial intimidation. These are not civil matters. They are criminal matters." Her attorney tried to speak again. I told him he would have his opportunity. That opportunity was not now. I then picked up my phone, the direct line on my bench, and I called the court administrator's office. I said 3 words, "Send someone up." Within 6 minutes, 2 officers from the Judicial Security Division were standing inside my courtroom doors. I looked at Diana Castillo and I said, "You came here today believing that your husband's rank was a weapon you could use in my courtroom. I want you to understand something clearly. This bench does not recognize rank as a legal argument. This bench does not recognize connections as a legal defense. And this bench does not respond to threats. It responds to them." I found Diana Castillo in contempt of court on the spot. I fined her $10,000 payable immediately for criminal contempt. I referred the judicial intimidation charge to the state attorney's office for independent review. But I wasn't finished. I went back to the original case. I reviewed Rosa Delgado's complaint. I reviewed the audio recorded call to the home care agency. Yes, it had been recorded as part of standard intake procedure, and yes, we had obtained it. I reviewed 3 statements from neighbors on Coventry Street who had witnessed Diana Castillo's behavior that night. I found Diana Castillo guilty on both counts: noise ordinance violation and criminal harassment. Maximum fines on both counts. Mandatory community service, 200 hours. Not picking up litter. Not sitting in an air-conditioned office. I sentenced her to serve those 200 hours at a community health clinic in the east side of the city, the same side of the city where Rosa Delgado lived, providing administrative support to home health aides and their patients. I wanted her to spend 200 hours learning exactly who the people she had spoken to that night were. But here is where the story truly becomes historic. Diana Castillo did make those phone calls. That afternoon, from her attorney's office, she contacted 3 people: a city council member, a deputy administrator at the courthouse, and the chief of the Fairview Police Department himself. All 3 of them were informed by their legal counsel that intervening in an active contempt of court proceeding referred to the state attorney would constitute obstruction of justice. All 3 of them made no further contact. Captain Gerald Castillo, Diana's husband, was placed on administrative leave by the department the following morning. pending an internal affairs review of whether he had prior knowledge of his wife's attempt to leverage his position to influence court proceedings. He had not. The review confirmed this within 2 weeks. He was reinstated. He also quietly filed for divorce 6 weeks after that. I don't know if those two facts are related. I'll leave that to you, but there is something else. 3 days after my ruling, the state attorney's office opened a formal investigation, and not just into the courtroom incident, but into a pattern of behavior. Because when you threaten a judge and the state attorney starts digging, they don't just look at the incident you showed them, they look at everything. And what they found was that over a period of 4 years, Diana Castillo had made similar calls to businesses, to landlords, to a school administrator, to a local contractor, on at least 9 separate documented occasions, always the same script, always the same reference to her husband's position, always resulting in the other party backing down and the matter disappearing, until Rosa Delgado. The state attorney filed 11 charges: harassment, abuse of official influence, a felony, filing a false employment complaint, obstruction. Diana Castillo's attorney negotiated a plea. She pleaded guilty to 3 felony charges. She was sentenced to 14 months of supervised probation, a $47,000 fine, and permanent notation on her record. She will never again be able to reference her husband's position in any professional or legal context, because she no longer has a husband in that position. And the 200 hours of community service, she completed them. I know, because the clinic supervisor sent me a letter. He said she had been difficult at first. He said she had been resistant, dismissive, and uncomfortable. He said that by month 3, something had shifted. He said she had started coming in early. He said she had started learning the patients' names. He said she had started asking the home aides questions, real questions, about what their days were like. I don't know what that means about Diana Castillo. I'm not in the business of redeeming people. I'm in the business of holding them accountable and letting them decide what to do with that. I want to tell you about Rosa Delgado. 6 weeks after the ruling, I received a card in my chambers, handwritten, simple card, the kind you buy at a drugstore. Inside it said, "Your Honor, I don't have the words to thank you properly. I have worked in this country for 16 years. I have paid my taxes, raised my children, and cared for people in their most vulnerable moments. I have never asked for special treatment. I have only ever asked to be treated like I exist. That morning in your courtroom was the first time I stood in front of someone with power and felt like the truth was enough. Thank you for making the truth enough. Rosa." I keep that card in my desk drawer. I have read it more times than I can count. On days when this work feels heavy, and it does feel heavy more than people know, I open that drawer and I read it again, because that is why I do this. Not for the dramatic moments, not for the verdicts, for that sentence. The first time I stood in front of someone with power and felt like the truth was enough. That should not be a rare feeling, it should be the standard. In every courtroom, in every office, in every interaction between someone who has power and someone who doesn't, the truth should always be enough. About 8 months later, I saw Rosa at the community health fair that the clinic, the same one where Diana Castillo served her community hours, was hosting downtown. Rosa was there volunteering. She was helping elderly patients navigate the sign-in process, translating for Spanish-speaking families, making sure people felt welcome. She saw me across the room and she stopped. She walked over and she shook my hand with both of hers. She said, "Your Honor, Isabella got into her first choice school, full scholarship, pre-med." I told her that was extraordinary. She shook her head. She said, "She told me she wants to be a doctor because she watched her mother refuse to be invisible." She said, "If you can stand up in a room when someone is trying to make you disappear, then you can do anything." I didn't trust my voice to answer that, so I just nodded and squeezed her hands. That moment is worth more to me than every commendation and plaque I have ever received. I've thought about Diana Castillo a great deal since that October morning. I've thought about how someone arrives at the place she was in, so completely certain that her husband's name was a skeleton key to every locked door. I don't think Diana Castillo was born that way. I think power, when it's borrowed and never truly earned, does something corrosive to a person. I think she had used that borrowed power so many times to make discomfort disappear that she had forgotten something fundamental. Power borrowed from someone else's title is not power. It is a performance of power. And like all performances, it ends the moment you walk into a room where the audience doesn't know the show. My courtroom is that room. I've also thought about the 9 times before Rosa Delgado, the 9 times someone else backed down, the 9 times the complaint quietly disappeared. I think about those 9 people. How many of them were like Rosa? How many of them went home and sat in their driveways so their children wouldn't see their faces? Justice is not self-executing. It requires people who are willing to stand up even when the person threatening them has a title, a last name, and an attorney in an expensive suit. Rosa Delgado had every reason to let it go. She was tired. She was scared. She had 3 children and a night shift and bills. She had everything to lose and seemingly nothing to gain. She stood up anyway. And because she stood up, 11 other instances of the same behavior came to light. Because she stood up, those 9 other people got something. Not justice, maybe, but validation. Proof that what was done to them was wrong, that it had a name, that someone had said so out loud. That matters. I believe that matters enormously. Here's what I want you to take from this story. You don't have to be a judge. You don't have to be an officer. You don't have to have a gavel or a badge or a title. What you need is the willingness to let the truth be enough, to say what happened, to write it down, to file the complaint, to show up to the courtroom in your work scrubs when you'd rather be sleeping. Because when ordinary people refuse to be invisible, extraordinary things happen. The powerful discover their limits. The records are corrected. And somewhere, a 14-year-old girl watches her mother refuse to disappear and decides she can do anything. That's justice. Not just the verdict, the whole chain of events that begins the moment one person decides their truth is worth telling. Thank you for watching this all the way to the end. If this story meant something to you, if you believe that no title, no badge, no last name, no zip code places anyone above accountability, then I want to ask 3 things of you. First, subscribe to this channel. I have more stories from this bench, stories that will challenge you, move you, and remind you why justice still matters. Second, leave a comment. Tell me, have you ever been in a situation where someone used their position or connections to intimidate you? What did you do? Did you stand up or did you back down? I read every single comment. And third, watch the next video on your screen right now. It's a story about a homeless veteran who walked into my courtroom with nothing. No lawyer, no money, no connections. And what happened when the other side didn't realize exactly who they were dealing with. I've been on this bench for 43 years because I believe one simple, stubborn thing. The courtroom is the last truly level ground. In the world outside, money talks, connections open doors, titles earn deference. But in my courtroom, you stand before the law as yourself, not your husband's rank, not your zip code, not the suit on your back or the attorney beside you, just you and what you did and what the truth is. And on the morning of October 3rd, 2024, the truth was a woman in work scrubs who had parked on a public street for 3 years to care for an 84-year-old woman who didn't want to die alone. That truth was enough. It will always be enough. God bless you. Take care of each other, and never ever let anyone make you feel like your truth doesn't belong in the room.